recording, Leanne, now?
I believe so.
Good, excellent. Well, welcome today for our Data Gene Breeding Briefs webinar. We're covering today the topic of calving ease and gestation length, and it will be one of a series of 6 where we also cover in weeks to come fortnightly mastitis and cell count, breeding for fertility, female genomics, heat tolerance, which will be topical in November, and the updates that we'll have to the BPI, which we're releasing our main index in December. But today, we're going to concentrate and go through the development of our calving ease ABV as well as gestation length. Now, joining me today too, we've invited one of our key participants in our GINFO program. Now, GINFO is actually a group of farmers that we invite, and they're a key group that we collect key information, so data from. So all aspects of dairy data, calvings, joinings, production, and calving ease particularly is key to that. And so welcome, John. John is from Calora in Western Victoria and runs a large Holstein stud called Kinlaura Holstein. So welcome, John.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me.
And so I'll be using John as we go, just really for a reference, to also give us a hands-on experience about how we've developed the calving ease and gestation length ABVs across time. So why are we looking at calving ease and gestation together? Well, the two have a direct impact on animal health and welfare, and a big impact in terms of not only the cow that calves, but also the calf that's born. And the effects are immediate as well as long-term. So it's not just a short-term effect. Some of the effects which we'll show you can actually go through the life of the cow. And gestation length is something too that's very topical. We're able to measure that now. So that's the time in which the pregnancy takes before the calf is born. And of course, there's a direct link between gestation length and easy born calves or smaller calves. And also we'll cover what we've done recently with the development of both calving ease and gestation length, but linking that to genomics, which actually gives us a great opportunity to not only use it across our proven animals, but also our young bulls. So what impact does calving have? Well, or calving difficulty have? Well, if you look at a graph, what we've been able to show, so this is a first calf animal. If an animal, a heifer particularly, has a hard first calving, her chances of survival in the herd relative to the rest of the herd up top is reduced. Now, obviously the difference between those two lines is the difference between the survival rates. But the point I'd like to show, it's not just in heifers, it's also in cows. So as we get to cows, even cows, 4th, 5th, 6th calf, if they have a hard or a difficult calving, it actually impacts their chance of surviving in the herd. So the impact is not just at a heifer level, it's also at a mature cow level, and the impacts, affect the survival rate of those cows. So there is an economic impact. It's not just a short-term cost. So where are the costs? Well, the difficulty or calving difficulty, a lot of the costs are tied up with your labour. So the actual cost of you calving that cow and the time it takes extra to calve a cow with a difficult calving. You've got your drug costs or your medication costs, obviously your vet assistance costs, and in some cases that may be a big peak as well. And you've also got calf mortality. So they're the direct costs of calving difficulty. But the costs that you actually incur going forward is possibly the death or loss of that particular cow, but also reduced fertility. Now, that may surprise people, but it's actually one of the biggest costs. So that number does increase as the cow eats lactation. So it can have a huge impact, or it does have a huge impact. Now, what we see with calving is, with our major breeds, is that our bull calves in the Holstein breed are obviously bigger than female, so that's where we've had the bulk of challenge over time, is with our bull calves. And we do see that. It's not just a Holstein thing. We do see that across other breeds. And if you look at the red breed to the right, they likewise see the same thing. So it is seen. The only breed that doesn't show that difference is Jersey. So Jersey bulls and Jersey heifers calve without too much difficulty. Hence, we don't calculate calving ease for the Jersey breed, but we are collecting information across those other breeds. So the cause of calving problems, and I've just listed the major ones here. Cow age has a big impact, and obviously the focus is there on maiden heifers having the most challenge. The size and structure of the cow or the heifer and the sire she's mated to can have a big impact. As we mentioned, the sex of the calf, so bull calves are bigger than female calves on average. The time of year of calving, so there is a difference between autumn calving and spring calving, which is generally tied up with the next one, which is the condition of the cow at calving in terms of body condition, plus also that dry period, that last month pre-calving, what conditions the cow is experiencing during that time, and whether or not she's putting a huge amount of effort into calf growth, or whether or not that's being controlled. Obviously, there's some chance effects like biology. We have a percent of calves that are malpresented, breech births, for instance, or we have a level of deformity occasionally where a calf or a cow will have difficulty calving an animal or a calf that's slightly deformed. And of course, we have genetics, and that is the area that we've focused on particularly. So calf size, calving difficulty, and gestation length are actually things that we can control. So when we look at calving ease, we've really got the two baskets. So the tools we have can be split into management, which is what we've done over time, but increasingly we've also got a toolbox that includes a lot of breeding tools. So things that we can do to improve calving ease and to reduce those other costs that we've just seen. So before we had calving ease as an ABV or as a breeding value, we were basically reliant on managing it through what we did. So a lot of maiden heifers, particularly Holstein heifers, weren't joined to Holstein bulls. The chance was, even natural bulls, the chance was too great. So the management practice at that time was joining heifers to Jersey, so Jersey bulls or Jersey AI, or the use of beef bulls. So we had popularly for many years Murray Grey or Angus, but of course farmers soon realised that Angus bulls were getting bigger and they were having difficulty there as well. And the challenge there was that you basically gave up that first calf. So to get that first calf out of a maiden heifer, you were really joining it to a bull or a breed where you weren't keeping that calf as a future replacement. So that was really, your maiden heifers are amongst your most, or they are the most fertile animals in your herd, and potentially the best genetics. So we were, in essence, foregoing that first calf just to avoid calving difficulties. So now I'll throw to you, John. What you can remember the days where we didn't have calving ease. What was your recollect of managing calving ease on your maiden heifers? So how did you manage it before we had calving ease ABVs?
Yeah, we used to always use the Jersey bull. So we used Jersey AI some periods of time when we were going back to 20 years when we were crossbreeding, but for the next 5 years after that, we just used Jersey bulls, and then I think it's been 8 years now we've used 16 on the cows. And we've got on the heifers, we've got wonderful results from doing that as well. So Yeah, it certainly had no information. It was a guessing game, so it was just trying to cut the risk out by using Jersey bulls.
Jersey bulls. And the calves that were born, did you milk them, or did you keep them, or did you sell them?
In the early stages, I kept some, but then we started going through a Holstein after that, so we
Yep.
started selling them off. And so,
Yep.
look, I agree. It's an opportunity genetic game. We've got an opportunity to use Holsteins now. Is much to turn up, I think.
Yep. Yep. So it was really that first calf was almost foregone, just basically to get that heifer into the herd lactating. Then you got serious about replacements, but it was a lost opportunity. But understandably at that time, anybody that calved Holstein heifers to Holstein bulls and had difficulty will vividly remember, having vets to farm and having difficulty, knocking the heifers around, and those effects were sometimes could be permanent too, John, couldn't they?
Well, exactly. The first Holstein bulls that we used at the time were older proven bulls that had a bit of calving age record on the map, but you were probably slowing down your genetic game along the way because you were using some of the older bulls, not the better ones that were probably coming available at the time. So, plus the sex center wasn't available then too, so it was a 50-50 with the bull heifers, and often you just have so many calves just because it was not worth the problem.
So with calving ease, we've actually had ABVs. We first developed our first calving ease ABV in the early 90s, 1991. But as the challenges we had then, which as John mentioned, we had in those days progeny test bulls, which only had limited amounts of semen distributed. So we had progeny test and then we had proven. So it wasn't until the bull became proven that we really started to collect significant calving ease data. So what John indicated there was that we finished up having very accurate information on very old bulls. So the difficulty was we could only calculate pedigree averages for young bulls. So that was low reliability. The reliable data was with the old bulls, but a lot of those were actually weren't the bulls that were ranked at the top of the list at the time. And also in those days, we didn't have the electronic collection of calving ease data. So we do that now via the options of farm software and apps. So do you collect, John, your calving ease like you collect it in a pocket diary and then transfer it across the software?
Exactly. Yeah, I put everything, any difficulties, jot them down straight away, and then it's all put on easy theory, and that gives you an opportunity to rate the level of calving ease that the typical or any challenge you might have had, and then that's the data's transferred through.
Great. And the big game changer, as was mentioned, was genomics. So we've, in recent years, the first release was this year, we've been able to now couple genomics. So that's the prediction of a result from looking at the genes of particular animals. So what we've been able to do is couple now genomics. So we've got genotypes on all of our major breed bulls now, Holstein and Jersey. Well, Jersey is not applicable with calving ease, but our Holstein bulls. And we're able to look at the genes of the young bulls, look at the genotype, and through the information that we've collected from herds like John through Ginfo, we're able to couple that and make the prediction. So young bulls, for instance, that are just born and genotype, we can actually predict what they will be for both calving ease and gestation length before those bulls are actually hitting the AI centres or selected by the AI centres for semen collection.
So, Pete, we've actually got a question here from Henny in New Zealand. Is there any information about the heritability of malpresentations at calving?
There would be, Hemi, a statistic. I'd have to go back. It runs at a I'll actually provide that to you. It actually runs at a fairly consistent level. It's not a high level, but it is certainly, so the malpresentation comes, it could be breech. So there's certainly a number on breech, but there's also deformity as well. But if we look at a particularly young sire, so what I've done here is highlight a bull, and we've also got Bruce Ronald on today as a participant or looking. It's a young bull, a genomic bull. So if you look at his date of birth, the bull's just 3 years old. So he's not old enough yet to have daughters. So if we look down here, he's got no milking daughters yet. So we're still waiting. They'll be calving in the next year or so. But what I'd like to highlight is the fact that we collect huge amounts of information on calving ease and gestation length very quickly in a bull's life. So here's a young bull that hasn't yet got a milking daughter, but we've already got nearly 1,000 daughters or calvings recorded. And we've also got gestation length calculated. So that's a young bull, a genomic bull, and we're able to not only predict, but we're also able to gather real information on that bull in live time. So farmers like John can then use that information with a lot of confidence. And if you look at the reliabilities, we're pushing into the high 90s for a young bull, which is quite incredible.
That would have taken 7 or 8 years of a bull's life pretty well in the past to be able to get sort of reliability.
Absolutely, John. In the progeny test days, the bull would have had 500 or 600 units distributed. Then he would have been, and we probably didn't do a great job at that time collecting the calvings from that. We then had to wait until that bull went out as a proven bull, and then you as a farmer really had a bit of a lucky dip, like we didn't really know at that point. And it was then 3 years after that we found out whether or not he was good, bad, or indifferent. So it's a huge gain now collecting that information from all the data from herds such as John and others that contribute that. So if we look at calving ease, we have a range. We express it on a scale where 100, so an ABV of 100 is average, and we've easy is represented as the bigger number, 100, and so the highest or the easiest calving we have is rated at 107, and the more difficult is rated below 100, so that's at 97. So our recommendation looking at that scale and the bulls, if you're looking for maiden heifers or cows that need calving assistance, to look at a calving ease ABV of greater than 103. And there are many, many choices. Bulls below 100 or 100, they're fine with cows. So mature cows that have already had a calf, second, third calvers, there's no need to be too critical on that. Because what we're finding now too is that the bulls that left huge calves, and you could remember some of those, John, over time, some of the bulls, Southwind and Marcus Ned and bulls like that, they're just not making the young bull entry now.
Look, interesting on Genetics Australia list, there's not one under 100 on the current list of bulls available. So it's got the stage that's improved that much that those bulls don't even make it anymore.
Yeah, and it's a selection. It's people obviously focus on the easy M, but from an AI centre, there's not a lot of value in putting a bull in that's going to leave huge calves. So recommendation is for calving ease ABVs, look for animals above 103, and that will also include our young bull list as well. So genomics is a great predictor of that as well. And it's not just the pure breeds. We have people such as Tim Humphries. He's involved in a 3-way cross. He certainly looks at calving ease when choosing his Holstein sires to be part of his 3-way crossbreeding program. So the second part of our discussion, and it's linked, is gestation length. So it's actually, we can record accurately from the point of insemination of the cow, successful insemination to the point of calving. We can actually record the number of days that pregnancy takes. So, and there is a variation. So part of just managing with gestation length, the focus is really two ways. It's managing late calving cows, but it's also helping those cows. So joining them to short gestation bulls allows those cows to calve earlier in the next year, and I'll show you the impact that have. And also we've seen a strong link between gestation length and calving ease. So what we see, and this is probably the least surprising of all science that I've ever seen, is that the longer the calf stays in the cow, the bigger the calf. So not exactly rocket science, but it is interesting to see that, you know, here is our normal expectation. So normal size calves around that 281, 283 days, but the longer the calf actually is in the cow, the bigger it gets. So every day it goes beyond normal, we can expect a bigger calf. And what we see from our data is that where we collect that information, so calves, John scores the calf. So when he scores the calf, it's on a scale of 1 to 5, where 3 is normal, 2 is small, 1 is tiny, and on the other side, 4 is big and 5 is huge. So what we see is that for the calves scored 1, 2, or 3, we can expect normal calving. But as the calf size increases, so we get to big and huge, the difficulty obviously goes hand in hand. So when you look at gestation length, if you've got a bull with a longer gestation length with his calves, it will push more of his calves into this range. Hence, expectation of more difficult calving. So when we look at short gestation or gestation length bulls, it's particularly important now in seasonal calving herds. It is a way that they can manage, particularly those late calving cows. It can be used to tighten calving patterns. So for people that want to keep a nice, close, tight calving pattern, those late cows can be joined to short gestation bulls. The fact that I found hugely interesting is that if you get a late calving cow, if you join her to a short gestation bull, so that's a bull whose calf will come out a little earlier next year, it actually assists that cow in becoming more fertile. So the impact of short gestation is that the cow will calve earlier next year, and it's all tied up with the number of days she has in milk before she's joined. So if you can give her, most studies indicate that a minimum of 40 days in milk before joining, but a preferred 60 days actually has that cow at optimal joining or optimum fertility. So if you've got late calving cows, there is an option to use the information that we now present on gestation length to those later calving cows and actually encourage them to calve earlier next year, which, as I mentioned, has a physical effect of giving her more days in milk next year before joining, and she herself is more fertile in doing that. So have you found that, John? Have you used gestation length yet? It's only just released.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I used it on my heifers this year. I used it with Giles, 6 salmon, and he's got a -10. So there's a benefit there for those heifers, making sure they calve right at the start of calving next year. And I'm using the bull at the end of our joining the cows as well to try and tighten up a bit as well. But if it's something you look at, absolutely, for that last segment of the joining, you're probably not going to be using your first. You've got a strict calving date to start with, but certainly to give those cows a bigger opportunity to get in calf. You pointed out there the minimum 40 days. You might get a small percentage between 30 and 40 days, 10% in calf, but obviously the closer they get to the 60 days, the higher the perception rate they get with the cow. So very important. Get that cow in early as you can to give it the opportunity to have a cycle prior to doing as possible.
Yep. And the other part to that, John, yeah, the other part to that, getting the cow in earlier, is of course the calf is born earlier, and I haven't yet met a farmer that likes rearing late calves either. So particularly for replacements, because that sets up a cycle where that calf just struggles to catch the rest of her group, really for her entire lifetime almost, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, we try and get our calves going around over that period if we can.
So with gestation length, we publish that, and what you'll see with the ABV, we actually put it in day terms. So for every ABV unit is a day shorter gestation. So and a negative number actually means days shorter. So in this case, if we've got a gestation length or bull with an ABV of -8, because the bull contributes half the genes to the calf, we would expect that animal to be born at least 4 days earlier. And in John's case, the bull he mentioned before, Giles, he's actually a -10 bull. So his calves, without an influence of a dam, would be expected to be born 5 days ahead of time. So you're really picking up a week, which at that critical time with late cows is a great option, because the option we had in years gone by of artificially bringing cows forward, those options aren't there now. And they were always debated over time. We now have a natural option where we can actually bring those cows forward by joining them to a short gestation bull. So don't underestimate the value of having that extra 5 or more days in terms of calving, and the impact that has on that cow's fertility, the cow that calves going into next year. And I know I spoke to Pat Glass. Pat's up in northeast Victoria. He certainly uses gestation length now as one of his tools as well. So reliabilities, likewise, we have genomics. So we have a prediction of that not only through pedigree, but through genomics. And likewise, we actually pick up this information very quickly. So even on a young bull, we can actually monitor his calvings, and we do finish up with reliable information, 70% or better. And as you saw with the bull previous, we're already pushing into 90% for a bull who yet hasn't got milking progeny. We also, with females, we also calculate exactly the same information. So this is a particular female, a young heifer. So she's just had her first birthday. If you look, she's in August 2019, so she's just 12 months old, but already the fact that she's genotyped and we've got a pedigree, and her sire and grandsire have got information, we're already picking up some very accurate information on the heifer before she actually has a chance to show us. So she hasn't yet been joined, but we can calculate through the information that we collect, we can calculate her expected calving ease ABV and her expected gestation length. So it's fantastic information, and you'd be seeing that coming through on your young calves too, John, wouldn't you?
Oh, that's right. The amount of data you get from genomic testing, and we've just got the first back from this year's calves, and all that information's there. It's fantastic to be able to pinpoint any problems you might have and any weaknesses, and certainly find a tool to improve those early on before you join for the first time.
So if you're looking, in summary, if you're looking for gestation length, you'd be looking for bulls less than 0. So bulls that have got a negative number, so negative days. And a great tool to be able to do that is our Good Bulls app. So we have our app, which you can download from the App Store or Google Play, and you can add a filter, or you can add multiple filters, but you can put calving ease in as a filter. And what I've done there, so we've got our Holstein bulls, I've been able to add calving ease, this column here, as another selection, and gestation length. And what you can do with the filters is independently select different cutoff points for each of those. So if you wanted to look at, say, if you're doing a heifer program, you'd be looking at 103 possibly as a calving ease cutoff. and what the app will do is allow you to sort on those bulls according to that criteria.
I've pretty well done it the last few years, Peter, my bull selection, so using my app. It's been fantastic. Just I put about 10 or 12 filters in of what I want to be elements I want to put into my breed, and been able to narrow it right down. Fantastic.
And
so my question for you, John, is do you have much choice? Do you have enough choice to be not having to compromise on other things?
No, plenty of choice. Really good. So I've probably narrowed it down to 20 bulls. Then I just picked out the ones out of that group that I'll be using the farm.
Do you have bulls in that group that surprise you, John, occasionally? You look and you think, whoa,
yeah.
I wouldn't have picked that bull.
I put some pretty stringent filters in there, and then it comes up with some bulls that, are just even across the board, but don't have any real standouts, but even across, we must have key traits to another group. But it does start with a couple of different ones, but two way sorting.
And I think the fantastic thing is the confidence we've now got in the technology, in the data, and in the genomics. Like, for instance, this bull here, Pilbara, he's actually just a young bull. But the thing is that you can rank him, like he's 106 Calving E's, which is a prediction based on his pedigree and genomics. But the confidence now you have, John, to use those young bulls, whereas at one stage, going back not so far, you really wouldn't touch a young bull, would you? Like, you just didn't have that confidence.
No, but the reliability has just increased so much in the last 4 or 5 years since the genomic data stacked up. So you do have a lot more confidence these days to use those tools.
So the Good Bulls app is a great resource. We also have other resources, which is on our Data Gene website. So we have fact sheets. So we'd encourage you to go to the Data Gene website, datagene.com.au, and under Learning Resources, you'll find some fact sheets. And there's some summaries of what we've covered today, which is basically the information that how best to use each of those traits and each of those tools.
We'll actually send an email out later on in the week with the links to the relevant resources on the website.
Oh, great. That's terrific, Leanne. But look, all of this wouldn't happen. We've had some fantastic cooperation. It's not just research that gets it there. And at the top of the list are our farmers such as John, our Ginfo, and our other farmers that actually take the time to record the birth of each calf. So it's not just one calf you record, John, it's the whole group. And the amount, recording it in your diary, transferring it to your farm software, having that information come through to us then allows our very talented research group through Dairy Bio and Ag Victoria, with support from Gardner and Dairy Australia, to be able to turn that into a breeding value that can then be used by farmers right across the board. So hearty thanks for all those farmers that do that, particularly our Ginfo, which John is one, because that's a group that we target for particular clean data. So we're always looking for new Ginfo herds that can do that. And of course, the Dairy Bio researchers that have continued to improve not only the accuracy, but the scope at which we can select different animals.
Don't get a hell of a lot of vary from the normal size calf these days. It's so close, so accurate all down to the Calving E's. You only get the odd ones who are large now, so it's pretty easy to do. Just on the average.
Absolutely. And through the connection we have with Interbull, through the information we have from Interbull too, we also transfer Calving E's data from other countries, so we're able to use that. So it is a great resource. I think we've shown, and if you're a farmer, you absolutely know that there's a huge economic impact to not getting it right. And it's not just the cost, there's emotional, there's, calving heifers is quite stressful. But now we find that people can do that with confidence using the information that's there, the ABVs that are there, and the accuracy and reliability, which is, as I say, the result of great work from people such as John. So with that, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, certainly feel free to ask them now, or if you'd like to direct them to us at a point. But with that, Leanne, have we any other questions?
No more questions at this point, and we're just about up to time.
Hey,
Beautiful.
Pete, Bruce here. I've just got a quick question.
Yep.
How far, I'm getting asked a lot around red carving.
Oh, yes.
Where ABS, we promote Norwegian reds, and they have carving values there. How far away are reds carving?
Red's carving ease, what we've got is already a collection of information that we've gathered from the red herds. So in other words, through software, through Easy Dairy, through Maestro, we've been able to collect reds. What we'll be doing, Bruce, we'll look at that at the same time that we actually look at genomics as well for the reds. So what we need to do is look at what's there. We haven't yet calculated carving ease for reds, but I'd be becoming more confident that the amount of information we got is now approaching a stage where we will be able to do that for reds as a separate breed.
Is that on the plan for December ABV release, Pete?
It's probably not for December, but it will certainly be something. So genomics will be the number one, but carving ease reds will be something. It will be purely dependent on the amount of data that we've got currently sitting there. But it is valid because the reds have as much of a challenge with carving ease as do the Holsteins. So no, good point, Bruce. That'll be part of the red study as well. Terrific, Leanne. Okay, thank you all. And thank you, John, particularly for participating. And we wish you well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Hang up for us. See you later, Peter.
Thank you, John. Thanks for that. We do appreciate it. Absolutely. So you're able to get to your appointment this morning or not?
No worries, yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
All right.
no, we've worked out well.
Terrific.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks
Cheers,
very much
Peter.
for joining us.
No worries. See you later.
Good on you. Cheers.